Hello, and welcome to the Plant Initiatives podcast series where we talk with people about the innovative work they're doing to increase the respectful treatment of plants. My name is Sue Fager. I'm a Plant Initiative board member. Today I'll be talking with Gay Bradshaw, founder and director of the Kerulos Center for Nonviolence. She holds doctoral degrees in ecology and psychology and was the first scientist to recognize and diagnose PTSD in elephants, chimpanzees, and orcas. Her books include the Pulitzer-nominated Elephants on the Edge, What Animals Really Teach Us About Humanity, and Carnivore Minds, Who These Fearsome Beings Really Are. She is the primary care for rescue colonized animals, including disabled endangered tortoises and native wildlife at Grace Village, Oregon, USA. Gay, welcome to the podcast. It's such a
Hi.
pleasure to get to speak with you.
Hi, lovely to be here. Thank you.
Let's start out with you sharing a little about the Kerulos Center and your work.
Yeah, it's the Kerulos Center, and as we shared, it's kind of a little bit of a tongue twister, but I always tell people, like, think about wolves howling like Kerulos or a dog. Yeah, I started the Kerulos Center in 2008. And that was initiated by my work and the diagnosis or discovery of, as you described, elephant post-traumatic stress disorder in free living elephants. And since then, it's morphed and expanded in terms of not so much size, but in terms of the breadth of issues and topics that we're involved in, including the beautiful collaboration with the Plant Initiative.
What was your inspiration for founding the center?
Well, as I said, it was not my intention. The elephant work was part of my dissertation, or actually was the core of my dissertation in Jungian psychology. And it was really the response from both the scientific community and the public in terms of their interest and wanting more, to learn more. So I started a nonprofit to be able to provide a space and resources for individuals who were really interested in, even back then, which is in 2000, it was sparked by my dissertation work with elephants, and particularly the diagnosis of elephant PTSD. And there was both such, interest both from the scientific community as well as the public, that I decided to form a nonprofit to be able to create a space for individuals to meet, to talk about very much a very different view of what I would call now the quote unquote natural world. And I use quote unquote because we're sort of in this linguistic shift going on. And it was really looking at a different view of what consciousness is, and quote unquote who has it. So that's really what was the founding of it. And initially, it still stayed very small, but it was really focusing on expanding the research, which really was more hermeneutics. It's going through existing things, and actually PTSD, in other words, looking at psychological symptoms and expressions in all species, is pretty damn obvious. When you see distress and whatever, and the diagnosis, the formal diagnosis that psychologists have created, like I said, is pretty obvious. It's like if someone has experienced torture or deprivation or abuse or any of these things which are very unnatural and are deviations from, in more conventional terms, what we're evolutionarily adapted to thrive in, then these symptoms come out, which are intense fear, could be plucking in a bird, or distress. And so essentially, that's really what the beginning of the organization was. And then there were companion courses and educational venues that went with that. And since then, it's just basically evolved to include a broader vision of what I would call the natural world, which includes plants, which is why it was so exciting to be approached by you all. So I'll give a 1-minute advert here. I know that you've got converts listening, but you have a magnificent organization in so many dimensions, and it's so fantastic. And so for us, it was really exciting because it felt very constrained to put the earth and the natural world in a box of animals, or one species, or even this notion of particular parsing up the world into species.
Well, thank you for that, Gay. And you've touched on it just a little bit. Do you want to expand any more on nature consciousness and what the Kerulos Center is doing to support that?
Yeah, thank you for asking. Actually, we have a new website, and that really expresses more explicitly what we've been evolving toward. Like I said, expanding, not so much in size, but in this whole notion and framing of how we view ourselves, but how we really view the natural world. And so I coined the term nature consciousness. It's nothing new. It's really this whole concept of non-duality. So it's this, which is a kind of a wonky term, but I encourage everyone to get used to it because we've been living in duality. In other words,
Right.
You, me, cat, dog, tree, rock, all of those parsing, body, mind. And that's really, that framing is really been invisible because it's been assumed. And so essentially the term non-duality is saying, whoa, that's all artificial. Those are imposed ideas, imposed perceptions, etc. So essentially what we're doing is, kind of zooming back and saying, let's look at our experience, let's look at animals and plants and the whole shebang, without all these kinds of divisions. And I coined nature consciousness to bring attention to nature, because typically in many studies, in particular consciousness studies, and of course this is something that was really core to our program now, is meditation and mindfulness. And we view meditation and mindfulness as essential practices that deconstructs, that dissolves, or that disables what I was talking about, this very deeply ingrained dualism, parsing up of differencing, and focusing on form. So the mindfulness and meditation, and we're developing in 2025, we'll be offering courses on that, is really, it's the same thing that many different wisdom traditions have. We have chosen to extend and to develop within the work of Thich Nhat Hanh, who was a Zen monk and peace activist. And that's Zen Buddhism. And one thing that really is appealing is that he himself, although, followed very strictly the precepts of Zen Buddhism, at the same time says, you don't have to be a Buddhist. You don't have to be anyone to do these practices. Anyone and any can do these kinds of things. So that is very open. And again, for us, that's really wonderful, because we do bring in other tools such as science, which is another insight, other ways that humans have approached understanding reality and life, indigenous peoples. And really what's core is plants and animals and rocks and, nature. And so really nature consciousness, the kind of the purpose of it is saying, using these practices to bring us into alignment with nature. And so that's really why I called natures, because a lot of times in meditation and mindfulness and other contemplative practices, there's a lot of focus on largely on human, which is great because we're the ones that have to change. But the point being is that nature is not just a backdrop. It's sort of recontextualizing, and it brings attention that nature consciousness is really what all of these deep traditions, wisdom traditions in particular, Zen Buddhism, have drawn from. So when you look at it, it's sort of like, people didn't go to a blackboard, or they didn't go to the library, to come up with Buddhism, or they didn't go to a library to come up with mystic Christianity. These are traditions that grew from the experience of being in nature and of nature.
Thank you. As an intuitive communicator, I have found that most of the beings we share the planet with are in tune with that idea of connectedness.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just humans who seem to have forgotten, not all
Mm-hmm.
humans, of course, but a majority of humans seem to have forgotten that we're just part of it, that it doesn't flow for us, that we're part of that flow.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's an individual or a community group who is interested in expanding their own nature consciousness, what can they do? What advice do you have for either the individual or the community?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of, sort of practical types of things. They can take courses with us, and we have a couple of free offerings. One is Living One, which Paul has participated in, which is um, uh, we get people from, around the world to talk about these kinds of things and discuss. And so you can connect with other individuals and reflect on that. We also have a Vital Breath, which is a weekly meditation, to connect and have silent meditation for healing the earth. And then there'll be courses. But I think, and then this is why we're doing it, is we're offering what we call sort of tools and instruments that would support people to do this. But it's all around us, in whatever way, is to engage in your own practices of of just this is the hard part, is because we're still using signs and we're still using symbols that are dualistic, because we're talking about phenomenon, and you as an intuitive communicator know that really we're talking about, we're not it, we're talking about it. And so anything in any kind of way that that encourages and brings an individual or an organization into the meditative mode. And I would say it's beyond form. I mean, I guess if I was giving advice, I would say, stop focusing on form. We need to stop focusing on the outside, that this is a tree and that this is a rock and this is a stellar jay. I mean, those are all, and that you're a human. I mean, those are all, important in the sense of, what my tortoise eats is different than what I actually, there's quite a bit of overlap, but her needs of her form, has her looking at the world in a certain different way and things like that. And I have that. But really, when you connect with someone, it's really beyond the form. Form's just the outside stuff. So I encourage, that there are many different ways of doing that. Meditation and mindfulness, of course, are ways of bringing attention. That's the idea. We're not just assuming, kind of waking up. That's the whole notion, is waking up to the present moment of reality. And that's where the plants and the animals live. They live in the present. They're wide awake and alert. They're not thinking about, oh, I've got to go down to there next week, and then I've got, oh, I wish I hadn't said that to that person. They're in the present. So what I would say, I guess, in sum is explore. We're more than welcome to offer things, but explore ways in which you can begin a practice. And it is a practice, because it's been a lot of years, millennia, that we've been ingrained in seeing this world in this very biased and distorted kind of way. So I would say the bottom line is explore, and really anchor your life in a practice which brings us into the noumena, brings us into the ineffable, whether it's love, it's the connection, it's that unity, and anchor in it, and learn how to be that. And you can be with humans and other animals. And that's where the animals and plants live, as I said.
Okay, thank you. Since 2018, the center's been hosting a monthly webinar, Living One, that asks the question, we know what wrong looks like, but what does right look like? Over the past 6 years, what have you learned from presenters about how we move from wrong to right?
Yeah, that was a phrase that there really isn't a wrong and a right. I mean, in the sense of, it's called Living One, and we started it with the intent of, again, holding a space, providing a space for individuals from different walks of life and different perspectives to come together and talk about their vision of what healthy, positive, peaceful, loving ways of living are, that are inclusive and that are not exclusive
Mhm.
of our plant and animal kin. And the right means, part of the reason I coined that little thing is like, we kind of know what's wrong and we kind of get bogged down into that. It's very easy to kind of get bogged down. There's some basic kinds of things, like I would say, go plant-based eating, and practices, there's some practical things, recycling, changing. And I will say we need to move away from capitalism and an exploitive way of being in the world. So there's some, what I call obvious types of things. Those are more external. But the idea of right is really getting down is, what does it look like when we regard a tree like the oak tree that I've known all my life. He's much older than me. What does my life look like when I just don't take him for granted? When he becomes really a decision maker in my life. And I don't say, that kind of reveals my life. In other words, when I'm not just making all the decisions, what does that look like? What does it look like when or when one does not prioritize or privilege the human-human relationship, in the sense of, that's, it's always like, well, a human-human relationship is more important than a human dog or human aspen relationship. And so that's really what Living One was. And we have certain foci topics, but it's really trying to get this sort of geodesic dome, all these different facets of different perspectives, and then also having individuals share what their path has been, how that, internal evolution, and what are the ramifications. A lot of times with this is a huge shift we're going through, and all of a sudden it's like, well, that's all fine on paper or to talk about it, but when you put it into practice, it looks a hell of a lot different. There are challenges. There's social rejection. There's quote unquote self-sacrifice, which I think is, I was talking to a dear friend of mine, and I was talking about our sanctuary. I'm trying to develop this concept of, we had a Living One on recognition, reparation, and restoration, which is a theme in the human domain for marginalized and colonized humans, American Indians, African Americans, Indigenous, you name it. So how do we bring that into the context of non-humans? And so I was trying well, we're developing this kind of education program for that. And I said, well, I'm really not asking people to self-sacrifice. And she said, why not? Why not self-sacrifice? In other words, that a lot of us, I'll put it that way, or many people, humans, are able to live and think and do what they do because of what has been done to others. So in other words, to kind of, it's not just, it's not just like, oh, I'm nice to plants, or I'm nice to animals, and I give money here and which is wonderful. But what am I internally changing? How am I really different? How am I becoming more able to really honor and reflect and value the oak's values in life in such a way? What do I need to give of myself in order for others to be able to live in peace and well-being?
It's a big mind shift, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm really excited. I've been walking this path for a long time, and just to see where we are now versus 50 years ago,
Yeah,
it's incredible.
yeah.
And I'm just pleased to be here and part of it, even though it's hard sometimes.
I really like that you brought that up because, things are not looking very positive. But on the other hand, I am astounded every day. Like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm listening to people who are devoting their life, and they don't have to wear monk outfits or anything like
Mhm.
that. We're ordinary people that are making radical changes and valuing and making radical internal as well as external changes. So I'm glad you brought that up because I think it's really exciting. Yeah, I get really depressed and despair and it's outrage, the whole rainbow
Mhm.
of, kind of icky feelings. But at the same time, it's so critical to not forget and not be engaged in this incredible evolution of human consciousness. And again, it's kind of like turning the Queen Mary. I mean, this has been going on for a long time. And yet I see incredible rapid change at a fundamental level. And as you said, with the mind, we have this little tagline on our homepage that says, by changing how we think, or by changing how we think, we change what we do. We change our consciousness and we change everything. We change everything. And that has this whole ripple effect in very profound ways, in seen and unseen ways.
Mhm. I think people are beginning to feel into and expand the notion of connectedness. As an animal communicator, I have so many people who want to know what's happening with my critter. Um, I tune into my ash tree, my big matriarchal ash tree that I worry about almost every day. Oh, is she going to be safe from the emerald ash borer? And think, what is my life going to be like when her natural lifespan ends? Because she's an earth tree. There's so many creatures that are supported by her. But I also think that we can learn, and the creatures we share the planet with, whatever form they take, um, are helping us and can help us with our shift if only we pay attention.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. And I think that that's what we say is that living when we anchor our own values and ethics with those of the plants and the animals and the earth. So that takes that does take reflection, that does take slowing down and letting go of all these other kinds of things to really hear and to
Mhm.
have it sort of infuse and permeate um, and become an oak or at least what do they call it? An honorary oak or an honorary
Mhm.
ash.
I like that. I like that. The Kerulos Center hosted a new webinar series this year as supported by a grant from the Plant Initiative, Plant Voices, Guides to Understanding Nonviolent Living, including a presentation by our executive director, Paul Moss. How did this series change your thinking about the rights of plants, if it did?
I don't, for me personally, I don't think it really changed. I was just really excited because you all brought in, Paul and your organization really made explicit what I have been personally, working with. And it's just a real gift because it really kind of shifted by having this kind of public colloquium of people focusing on non-animals, but plants. It really was another very deep dissolution of all of these different barriers that we live with. And it was so invigorating. So for me, it felt great. And I felt like there was a sense of unification, and,
Mhm.
and it was just very stimulating for our viewers. I mean, they're not just ours, but for people who saw it and listened, it was really quite extraordinary in that way. And again, I think it really helped galvanize and it encouraged us because at that time we were developing our new website, that, I think it's on the home, earth, plant and animal liberation. So it really was helpful for us to just kind of went, yeah, we do not want to just focus on one form. That doesn't mean that we're in any kind of way downplaying the needs of animals. It's just, again, as I was saying, seeing beyond form,
Mhm.
caring about the liberation and the well-being of life.
Okay. Paul, could you pause this for a minute, please? And this is kind of a follow-up to what you were just saying. How do you think the situation differs regarding the rights of plants and of animals? Do you think the two approaches are compatible?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Definitely. I think that there's some kind of mind twists and labyrinths to go through because we've been so deeply ingrained again in that dualistic thing of plant and animal. There's these currents that I think they have validity, but I think they're ill-advised. Like, well, if we start talking about plants, people are going to say, well, what's wrong with killing an animal, and the plant can think and I think that's passe. I think that's, yeah, in my think, yeah, it has a kind of, but that's a ridiculous thing. I think we're really at a point to be much more sophisticated and much more thoughtful. So no, I don't think so at all. I know when we made this video called the 10 Principles of Being Sanctuary with plants. We have one for animals. And I thought a lot about it. I'm just giving you personally. And really it comes down to, and we had a couple of speakers that showed how, for example, Will Tuttle talked about, picking fruit and love, and things like that sound kind of, oh, that sounds nice. But when you really sink into love,
Mhm.
and I genuinely feel like he and his partner, Madeline, there's so much deep love with them and their plants. You can feel it. They gave us a tour through their garden. And I certainly feel that way with the plants here. That there's really a difference when you are very deeply respectful. And I think that transcends the form. Now, obviously, there's quote unquote differences in the sense of, how certain animals live and how certain plants live. Obviously, as I said earlier, form is meaningful. It exists,
Mhm.
so there's different kinds of consideration, but the fundamental approach is love, and the fundamental is listening and paying attention and not taking um, uh, not making assumptions like, oh, that plant doesn't feel anything, or even doing things in a superficial manner, like, well, I say a prayer before I cut the tree. Well, what is the essence of that prayer, really? And I think it's kind of like, put yourself where that individual is. A large part of it, I think, is just our assumption of human privilege. And there's some
Mhm.
practicalities. For example, there's a branch and it keeps hitting me in the face with the maple. And I know, this is my intuition, that when that branch of the maple, quote unquote, and I intersect, it's because I'm not paying attention. Now, is it like the Wizard of Oz, the tree throwing apples? No, I think there's something in between, but there's definitely communication. And it's because I'm not being mindful. I'm just kind of blasting through, gotta get the chickens out and gotta give medication,
Mhm.
So
Sure.
I think at a fundamental level, we're really having to retool what we're doing. So no, I think being a plant advocate, quote unquote, and an animal advocate is one and the same. It's just a matter of maybe what one is drawn to in terms of how you spend your time. But I think it should be synoptic. I think it should be inclusive. in that way. And the animals are like that. If you look at, I forget where I wrote it. Anyways, it was some book I wrote, but anyways, I think it was in The Evolved Nest. And I was talking about the prejudice against, and I've written another book called Carnivore Minds, incredible prejudice against what are called predators, carnivores, wolves and snakes, rattlesnakes and orcas and bears, who are omnivores, largely herbivores, but omnivores, and and coyotes, and how people are, they're predators, and they're stalking and everything. And I was making the point that, well, so are elephants. So is a robin. A robin sitting there listening goes zap, finds the winner.
Yes.
And with the elephants, they move, their prey is just standing there, whether it's grasses or whatever, or a branch or a root or whatever. But also look at the way the elephants, they move around. So yes, they eat the plants, but in most cases that I know of, the plant usually doesn't die. And I think we have to go deeper and deeper down into really not making these glib, it's really going into deeply understanding how the nature of reality and how nature really works. And that means getting rid of all of these projections and assumptions that we have been brainwashed with for millennia. So I think a lot of conversations can be very facile and very superficial, and I think that we are really, we're compelled, and we have to go deeper into the value of life. And that includes ourselves. This is a touchy subject, overpopulation. It's incredibly presumptuous to have human children, and to understand those rudiments, and to say what are considered these fundamental rights when we're looking at life, seeing ourselves as we're just part of life. How do we best participate in this scenario where we're able to optimize and maximize on the well-being of life in that way? And I think when you approach it that way, a lot of these kinds of tensions really disappear. It doesn't mean to say we're going through a transition. Things are not easy. We've got this incredible system of exploitation, and we're trying to move into non-exploitation, but it's a messy transition. And be appreciative. It doesn't mean to be complacent. It just goes, sometimes I'm not doing the right thing, but being mindful of it and saying, well, maybe there's another way of doing that. In other words, eating, having vegetables that are appropriate to the season, instead of exporting them. So there's a whole laundry list of things. It's probably a long response to a short question.
Well, I agree. We have to go deep if we're going to shift. I don't think a shift can happen from superficial thinking. But since we're here, I wanted to ask you about hope. Okay, what gives you hope for our planet and the beings we share it with?
Well, I'm not really a big proponent of hope, in the sense of I think there's a much bigger picture going on. So this is my version of hope. Okay. I think there's a big mystery, and there's a hell of a lot out there that we have no idea of what, why, and how. And it's way beyond my ken. There may be individuals who have deeper insights than I do, but I'm more of like focusing on doing and being the right thing, being in the present. All of us, and I'll just use myself, I've got a lot of homework to do. And so I've got plenty to do in terms of practicing what I preach. And I think that we don't know what's going to happen. I mean, we see terrible, terrible things happening, directly and indirectly. And certainly I'm not complacent whatsoever. I live in a place where there's lots of hunting. We're targeted sometimes. They slaughter animals. It's terrible. It's terrible to witness suffering. The trees suffer. For example, their power lines, and they want to trim the trees. And, I get it, fire, blah, blah, blah. But, and I, it's very
Mhm.
painful for me to witness the pain that the trees suffer. And it's not just the quote unquote pain, it has to do with the lack of dignity.
Mhm.
That's very hard to bear. But I guess I find refuge, if you want to call it that, saying we don't know. It doesn't mean not like I go out and I talk to them. They, I've got a star by my name from all the agencies and whatever. Don't do anything with the trees until you talk to Gay Bradshaw, talk to that owner. And I go out there and I give them their, I said, these have been in my family for years, I mean, these cedars, for example, I planted them, and my brother and I had a little red wagon with our canvas bag from the creek of watering them, and now they're big. And I said, these are family members and they have rights. And I kind of give them their spiel and I talk about it. The plants still, the trees still suffer, and it feels terrible. Um, but I guess that, at the end of the day, I try to move into a good enough thing and just keep going in that way. So is there hope? If you get into the thing about, no, I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of suffering, huge amount of suffering. I mean, we've got this tidal wave, literally and figuratively, of exploitation and damage, which is happening. However, I do believe that the universe is, quote unquote, whatever you want to call it, is good. And I do also believe that deepens my commitment to saying, instead of wringing my hands, which I do, I feel depressed, I feel despair, is sit up a little straighter, do it better. Don't think about all of that. Don't think, just be, I'll tell you this little anecdote, which I love. I've been telling it lately. I was going to do a blog, but since I said it a few times publicly. I think it's kind of old hat. But anyways, years ago, Marlon Brando was this actor. I don't know if everyone knows him, but
Mhm.
like I loved him. He was just an amazing person. Anyways, he, in his obituary in the New York Times, a colleague of his told a story that they were students at Stella Adler's acting school, famous school. And so the teacher said to the students, okay, everyone, pretend you're chickens and a nuclear bomb has just gone off. And so the colleague is saying, everyone's running around and screaming and clucking and doing all this. And all of a sudden the teacher says, stop. And she looks over at Brando and he's squatting in the middle of the room. And she said, Brando, what are you doing? And he goes, I'm a chicken. I'm laying an egg. Why the hell should a chicken care about a nuclear bomb? So the byword is keep laying eggs. I mean, in that sense, I mean, it's obviously, they're not oblivious, they're not stupid. That's not it. But it's kind of like, do your job on the planet, for the planet, for life in that way.
Okay, thank you.
So I guess that's my egg, like hope egg.
Okay, I like it. I like it. You have a new webinar series coming up in February and March, attending to the More Than Human World. Would you like to talk about that for a couple minutes and share how people can learn about that?
Yeah, this is so exciting. We have an arc for the entire year, which is called Seeing the Unseen, Earth Restoration Through Re-Enchantment. And essentially, it's really kind of like, what is this non-dual world? What is this, like what I've been talking about? What is it? Because it's kind of like half of the equation. In other words, there's a lot of research, people like in, different consciousness studies, your own work.
Mhm.
So that's really kind of the exploration and kind of like, okay, let's go into that. This first series is co-hosted. Our host is Olivia Crossman, who's amazing and wonderful. And she's co-hosting this with Izzy Clark, who's from the UK. They're both former interns. And they're looking at this concept of attention. So in other words, it's decentering from the human and even personal, decentering our attention to the natural world. And individuals are going to be talking about their personal experience. I mean, they're coming from different sort of philosophical angles,
Mhm.
but then they're going to be looking at very practical applications or expressions. Some who are very intimate with trees, some who are working with animals in different ways. And so it's essentially a shift of our intention and really understanding, what does that mean when we shift our attention, in and how does that, what are the kinds of concepts associated with that, and then how does that translate to sliced bread? Oh,
I like
we
what you
are going
said,
to be, I will say one thing, we're doing something different. What we're going to be doing is, this is a free webinar, Living One, but we're also going to be offering it for those who are interested to take it as a course. So if they take it as a course, they'll be meeting with Izzy. They'll be getting readings and exercises prior to a particular speaker. And then they'll be attending that speaker, listening to it, and they can ask questions just like anyone else. So the difference is we're going to be offering it like a shell of a course, which we find very exciting. Again, which is to build community and communication.
I just think that's so important to help people get connected
Mhm.
with like thinkers. And I really love what you said about reenchantment. That just really resonates with me.
But what was that?
I love what you said about reenchantment.
Ah, yes, yes, yeah.
Any last thoughts for our listeners, Gabe? This has been a really fascinating time with you.
Oh, last thoughts. I don't know. I mean, I'm just really excited about, you know, we just welcome people, if people have ideas, or, you can go to our website, any feedback. We're still got little glitches. So if you find something, you can tell us. If you feel like taking courses, or just contact us, we're happy to talk with someone if there's an idea or whatever. And I guess I would just encourage everyone to, embrace this incredible enchantment that we live in, and go for it in terms of this new reality, which the plants and the animals live in every moment in that way. So, and subscribe to the Plant Initiative. I'm such a fan of you guys.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Gay, again, thank you for joining us and helping our listeners learn more about the work that the Kerulos Center is doing, and to better understand the importance of nature consciousness. I hope this podcast inspires listeners to get involved where they live, or about places that they care about, to advocate both for animals and for plants. So, Gay, give us your website address again.
It's www.kerulos, KERULOS as in snake.org.
Wonderful. And listeners, you can find previous podcasts on the Plant Initiative's YouTube channel, which you can access from our website at plantinitiative.org or directly on YouTube. So, Gay, once again, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye.